people that are in my community know how much I obsess over a clean photo.
Okay. So stop winding me up. You're making me feel guilty. There's literally no way you'd have left that there. It was massive.
G'day everyone, welcome back to the podcast, and if you're listening to this on YouTube today, I'm really excited. I've got Joe Bradford with me on our episode number 50, which is really exciting because a lot of podcasts, they get to episode 10, 12 and they kind of peter off and struggle. We're going nice and strong a whole year and we're at number 50. Didn't quite get it for the new year, but anyway, that's okay. And so I'm really excited. And Joe is a bestseller author. And I'm really excited to have a chat with her about her new book, which is Smartphone Smart Editing. It's kind of a follow-up to Smartphone Smart Photography, which was, Joe, was that 2018 that came out?
April 2018, yes.
And I think you had the real honor of being the first one to rank number one in digital photography category in Amazon.
Sure did. And our big British bookseller is Waterstones, and it stayed at number one there for ages as well. So no one was more shocked than me. When I wrote that book, I wrote it for iPhones and Androids because I've got an iPhone, my dad's got an Android. I will get 2 sales for this book if I write it for both platforms. So I honestly wasn't expecting much from that book. So no one was more shocked than I was to see that happen.
Yep. And that's one of the things I love about what you're doing is that you cater for both iPhone and Android. And even the iPad, the tablets, and that's really unique. That's something that I try and do because when I first started, I ran in-person workshops, and I went out there thinking everyone's going to have an iPhone. This is the most popular phone. People are turning up and asking about the Android, and I'm like, I don't know. so I had to pivot really quickly and cover both of them, and I think you do that really well, and I think that's a really smart selection with the app that you have for this book as well, Snapseed. Can you tell us a little bit about Snapseed?
Well, in terms of editing apps on phones, it's a real granddaddy. It's one of, it's like the godfather of phone editing apps because it's what was originally came from Nick Software, who have a great pedigree, but it got taken on by Google a long time ago. So, it's knocking on for 15 years old, and it's very well developed and very well researched and a very powerful app, but also it's free. So there's nothing wrong with a free app. And because it works on both platforms just as well, and you can switch between editing it on your phone, switching over to mobile. It's very seamless, the kind of integration with that app. And I just feel like it's my go-to app all the time. I've got lots of apps on my phone, as I'm sure you can imagine, but that's always just been the one I've loved most. So as you say, it felt important that everybody got the chance to learn to edit, and I didn't want to have to write 3 books when one would do. So for many reasons, it just worked out to be the perfect choice. I'm really, really glad I made it, actually.
Yeah. And so tell us a little bit about what you do day to day with the, I know you do a lot. you're a fine art photographer, you're in galleries, you are a tutor at a university. I'd love to hear more about that, but you also do workshops online now with Royal Photography Society over there in the UK. Mm-hmm. What else do you do? That's a lot.
So funnily enough, I'm just finishing up my 3rd book, and I'm actually in negotiations. Well, my literary agent this very morning is talking to a couple of different publishers about my 4th book deal. So I do still do a lot of writing, and creative photography is where my books are all at. But the last few have kind of been how-tos, and the next one that I'm interested in is more of a curated collection of photographs. So I'm branching out slightly with my writing, but I've got a few more how-tos lined up to come behind that as well. Smartphone is definitely my focus, and just mobile photography, shooting on a phone and editing on an iPad or a tablet, because I think the two work really nicely together. But yeah, as you say, I deliver in-person and online workshops for the Royal Photographic Society, which I've been doing for years. And we're just about to start doing a major project with loads of young carers in the UK, which I'm very excited about. So I'm just filming some videos and how-to videos for that. And I do work with Affinity Photo. Serif, they make Affinity Photo. That's another app that I really enjoy using on an iPad. So I do the odd bit with them every now and then. And I am a associate lecturer at Falmouth University, which is down at the bottom of Cornwall, and they've got a fantastic BA there, which is marine and natural history photography, and I'm one of the associate lecturers on that. I work with the third years, helping them get ready to go out and work in the real world and be my competition. So yeah, I like to do lots of stuff, and as you mentioned, I also make work which I sell in galleries, mainly in London and New York and Paris is my representation. And that's all stuff that I make by hand in my colour darkrooms, of which I've got 2 sat right behind me right now, waiting to be turned on today. So I like to vary it up. I'm just a photography fan across all its forms. I love talking about it, teaching it, writing it, being in my darkroom, shooting on a phone. I'm just basically a little bit obsessed, you could probably say. So.
Yeah. I love it. Someone else is just as passionate about it all.
Yeah.
Where do you think that passion comes from with I know you've been doing photography since the early film days and all that sort of thing, but how did you get into photography? Where does this passion come from?
So as a very young child, my dad used to be really into printing his own photographs and had access to a darkroom, and my uncle had a colour darkroom that he printed in. So from as early as I can remember, there were people around me printing up photos. So I always understood that photography wasn't just the pressing of the shutter, but it was the thing that you did in the darkroom afterwards. And I remember being very young. It was before we moved home in South Africa, so I can date that I was definitely younger than 7 when my dad walked in and found me cutting up his beautifully printed darkroom prints of me. I had a halo behind my head, and he'd spent all day practicing this lighting technique and came home to find me with a pair of scissors cutting myself out. And he said, "What are you doing to my prints?" And I was like, "I don't like the lighting in the back of this." What a precocious little brat I must have been. But from that point, I obviously had opinions and thoughts about how photos should look. And then when I was in high school, my mum worked in the local photography studio. So she sort of did a bit in reception, but she'd also help out in the darkroom. So I'd hang around there after school waiting for her to finish work if I wasn't doing sport. I'm really sporty. I'm just training for my 5th marathon at the moment. And so I was kind of outside a lot, but I quite liked coming in from the bright glaring sunshine and being in that dark space. And I guess later on, when I started to learn to do colour photography, the idea of being in the absolute pitch black and, not even being able to see your hand in front of your face, it's just another world. And it's a world that I can inhabit all on my own. I can be a little bit excitable and passionate about things sometimes, and I find the darkroom quite a calming space. But yeah, so I think photography's basically just always been there for me. But the other thing I love about it is that it's kind of uniting. Photography unites pretty much everybody, no matter where you're from, anywhere in the world, and what your interests are or your skill levels. Everybody uses a camera these days on some level. And I think that's why I kind of wanted to communicate to those people, not the people who feel like they want to be experts and are the ones that are technically intimidated by, all the jargon and the technical speak. I just wanted to communicate to all the people who just loved taking pictures and, and talk to them and make them feel confident and give them a skill set that would improve their pictures. So that's kind of how I've ended up where I am today. And then I can go and be nerdy in my darkroom and make my art for my galleries in my own time.
I love that. I love that you said that it's one of those, it's an activity that you can kind of withdraw and do it on your own and be, I know where you live, you're quite isolated. I
am,
so you're quite comfortable being on your own. And I think that's one of the things I like about photography is that it's escapism. I love taking macro photos and getting in nice and close. You got to concentrate, focus on the details, what's in front of you. Everything else kind of just dissipates. You don't really think about anything else. And but it's also, and you touched on something there, is also the connection, the community side of it as well. And I remember listening to a podcast episode where you talked about back in 2015 with your 365 project, the community, the connection, where people would actually send you a message on Instagram and say, "Hey, where's your photo?" I think that's really cool with photography as well, is the community side of it. Do you think that's where your passion for teaching comes from? I'd love to learn where that comes from and why you're so passionate about. I mean, you're clearly amazing photographer and you're earning an income and you've got opportunities there, but you're coming back to this education and you're doing quite a lot to help others. Where do you think that passion for teaching comes from?
I think very simply put, I just like seeing the transformational joy that people get from just gaining a really simple skill set. And it feels nice to be able to give that to people. You know, it's not hard to teach people the basics of taking a good photo, but in the course of a one-day workshop, whether it be a smartphone photography one or a darkroom one or whatever the skill set, I can still basically send people away after meeting me feeling very inspired. But secondly, it's just, you know, or B, sorry, A and B, I should say, be A, very inspired, but B, very comfortable and confident in knowing what the basic key tenets of photography are. You know, if you know how to compose, focus, deal with exposure and lighting and kind of see light in pictures, and obviously understand focal depth and depth of field, there's a few things that you need to kind of tie together, but actually they can be very simply explained, and the interconnectedness of those things can also be very simply explained. And if you do it, you know, if you sort of teach it by showing one step at a time, show them what to do, and then build a little bit of skill every few minutes on top of the last one, it kind of gives people a real sense of accomplishment and achievement. And I don't know, I think I kind of got addicted to all the happiness that it brings. It's such a lovely feeling to make people feel happy, and to afterwards, when people leave a workshop, whether it's online or in person, I'll be tagged in every photo they ever take and post on Instagram from that day forward, and they'll email me constantly, and all their family members will turn up for courses. And I just think it feels nice. It feels nice to be able to give that gift to people. And so perhaps I'm slightly addicted to that feeling as well. And, you know, it's just lovely. I like that interaction. And perhaps it's the yin to the yang of being alone in my darkroom. So having that opportunity to be around people, teaching gives me the chance to be around other people and learn about their lives and careers, and also to improve my teaching, because I get to find out what it is they need and what they want. And so I deliver this one-day workshop for the Royal Photographic Society, and people will join from Australia and America that get up at 4 a.m. to be present when the workshop starts, but on those workshops, almost every time I run it, I have to have a new version named for the last one that I ran, because even on a monthly basis, I'm constantly tweaking it, changing it, making something more simple, altering the order of things. I just feel like it's this thing that, you know, it's never a fixed thing that I just roll out over and over again. So, but the other thing I'm really passionate about is teaching people to have the confidence in their own voices. And, you know, so I do a 6-week course with the Royal Photographic Society, where for one day a week I have my students, and it's in small groups, and we work very collaboratively. We talk about what it is to that makes a good photograph, and we study different areas of it every week. And over the course of 6 weeks, the students kind of come back with what they're making, and by the end of it, they've realized that they've figured out what their own creative passions and where their creative voice is, and they kind of go away having found their voice. And I love giving that to people. I love being able to take someone who doesn't know what they're doing and send them away again fully confident and fired up and working, and that just feels brilliant to be able to give that. And I suppose that comes from 25 years of professional industry practice. You kind of get quite good at seeing what it is that, you know, it ignites a fire under people. So it's not really that difficult to feed it back to them. But I love that. I always write hundreds of notes. I've got notebooks everywhere. So when I teach anyone, I write notes constantly when they talk to me all through the day, so that at the end they say, "You're a brilliant listener." And I'm like, "I'm actually a brilliant note taker. I've written down everything you've said." And so by the end of the day, I can basically tell you exactly what you need to make you good, because I've kind of tried to understand you as best as I can and tailor things. So I think it's that. I'm a people person who spends a lot of time alone in a dark room.
Wow, how am I going to break that down? You mentioned so many things there I'd love to expand. But I think there's so many people, and I wrote an article on this a little while ago about finding your photographic style. And because so many people struggle with that through, you know, can spend decades, put so much pressure on themselves to come up with their unique style. But as you said, it's not something that you can copy from someone. It's kind of understanding what you already do, what your preferences are. Like I know you're in the national park, so you lecture in flora and fauna, so you're going to be naturally drawn to that type of photography. But then your style might then be, you know what, I'm surrounded by that every day. I want to do something different, and there might be another part of your personality that you connect with. I think it's really interesting. You mentioned there the transformation that people go through And that's really interesting because I try and break things down into a step-by-step system, because similar to you, I've been in photography for 25 years, but my background has been very technical. And it's only been the last 6 years that I picked up the smartphone and actually, for the first time ever, had an interest in photography because it was a tool of the trade, going out there, taking as incredible details accurately as what's there. There was never parameters for creativity. So the whole creativity thing is relatively new to me. And one of the things I love about teaching is that it helps me break things down and understand myself as well as listening to them. I think it sounds like that's something you do really well, is breaking things down for people and understanding them quite quickly. I mean, a 6-week program, but if you do this in the one day with Royal Photography Society as well, one day to break that down and help people at that level where you can have a transformation, that's pretty amazing. So bringing this back to photo editing, I know with our smartphones now, and we've both got the iPhone 13, amazing camera. The way that it does the frame averaging to get HDR, it automatically processes and recognizes, hey, there's a sky. We're not going to put extra detail in the sky. We'll skip that. We'll put the detail in where we can see textures. Does all this automatically. But one of the things that I find is that it doesn't know what our photographic intention is. So exactly. Is that where you think, well, I'm keen to hear, where do you think the future of editing is, and why AI and all this sort of AI, machine learning and all that? Is there always going to be a place? And we both know the answer, but I'd love your thoughts on why you think mobile editing is so important to learn as a skill for creativity and enjoyment in your photography.
I think the thing now that computational photography is king, it's very easy to create a beautiful photo without trying that hard. But as you say, that's that kind of, it's a bit like putting your DSLR on auto and just snapping at things. Once you have a better understanding of how the camera works, it kind of has this thing about slowing you down. And I think that applies both to photography and editing, which is crafting. Not necessarily a print, because people don't always print these days, although I wish people would print more often. But the idea of crafting a final image comes from understanding not only how you make a good photo within the camera, but also understanding the limitations of the camera you've got, which in fairness with smartphones has tended to be a greater set of limitations than with any other kind of camera. But if you understand what those limitations are and you can work with them, knowing that when you get to the edit phase, you can make the have a flourish with your editing that will bring the image out. So not that long ago, it would be really important to underexpose your images so that you've got a good load of sky detail, for example, knowing that you could pop a lightening effect in Snapseed that would just kind of lift the darker areas of your landscape, for example, and give you that kind of HDR effect. But I'd always say to people, turn the HDR off, and I'll show you how to do it yourself. I'll show you how to manage the different areas of your pictures. So I think one of the things that I hear commonly, and that makes me feel that editing isn't going to go away anytime soon, is that people will show you a photo they've taken on their phone and go, it looked better like this in real life, but this is kind of what it looks like on their phone. And I call that the visual divide, that kind of difference between what your eye sees and what your camera sees. And, it kind of comes down to this thing that our brain and eye combination are just the most sophisticated lens and processor anywhere. We haven't managed to replicate that with any kind of AI or camera setups yet. So there is going to be a disconnect between what technology we've invented can do and what we, as these super powerful processors and lenses, can do. So I think editing has a role to play in helping close that visual divide, and understanding how you can make an image look like how you see it in the moment is partly to do with understanding what it is that makes you want to take that picture in the first place. And sometimes that comes from quite an emotional thing. So it's not just, we're not always inspired to take something from a cold, calculating, there is a horse, I'm going to take that picture. You'll be like, wow, it's a windy day and the sun's on my skin, and here comes this beautiful black pony towards me, and I feel amazing, and the pony makes me feel even more amazing. So learning to make that connection with your emotional state in the moment of taking the picture is a really a great way to also think about how you edit your photos. So trying to edit the photo that returns you to that emotional feeling is something no AI can ever do for you. So I feel that kind of is part of the niche of what makes we humans still an important factor in taking photos. Even when the AI is overwhelmingly amazing, there's still a place for us to be involved and to have the final creative say and have that creative control, because it is our creative decision-making process that made us take our phone out of our pocket in the first place and capture that scene. The AI can't feel the wind in its hair, so we have to replicate those feelings ourselves, if that makes sense.
Totally. No, totally. I think it comes down to, because the phones are really good at picking up on skin tones and go, hey, there's a person in this, there's a really good chance that Joe wants that person in focus, and it'll do it. But if your intention was what's behind that person or whatever, that's really the only scenario I can think of where your phone will get it right. If you're taking photos of street photography, landscape, macro, anything else, product photography, the phone will technically get it nicely composed, do everything right, but it doesn't know what the intention is. It doesn't know that taking a photo of the glass pouring drink in another glass on a bar with the bokeh or the lighting in the background. It doesn't know what all your creative decisions are in your setup. Last year, I spent 3 months researching different compositional techniques and tools. I came up with about 100 different compositional techniques and tools, and I distilled all that into a 4-step process. And it was positioning yourself, positioning the main subject, supporting contextual elements for that narrative, and then the 4th step of that system was actually editing. And I know in your book with your prescribed workflows, you start off with cropping and straightening and perspective tool. I mean, how good is that tool inside Snapseed? It's brilliant. and I kind of questioned for a while. I'm like, really, should I put in editing all this inside this kind of compositional course, because it's editing, it's not. But that is one of the things I love about editing, is that we know the intention, we've got storytelling, we know, and I love how you said there about the emotional state when you took that photo. You're not just recording what's in front of you. There's a reason, there's a stimulus for bringing that phone out of your purse or your pocket, and I think that's critical. And then the next step is the composition and setting it up so that you're telling that story, because the phones don't know what the story is. They don't know. Exactly. I mean, they give us the grids, the grid lines for the rule of thirds, which is really helpful. It's fantastic for those that know what it's there for. It's not just to put yourself in the middle box. But so the phones are fantastic, and as you say earlier on, you said it gets rid of all the technical side of photography, which is brilliant. Then we can concentrate on the creativity, and that's one of the things. That's what I love about editing, is that it's kind of the final touch. It's your input, it's your personality, your style, or all that sort of thing. It's I just think it's brilliant.
I actually, one of the things I like to say to my students is to think about, if you've spent all this time crafting a beautiful painting, the last thing you might do is put some varnish on it, which will enhance it but also protect it, and kind of, it's the final stage, and editing kind of needs to be like that. You're not expecting to alter radically an image, but what you do put, it's just the final stage that you put onto an already decent photo that you've spent time crafting in camera, but you do a bit of pimping at the end. It's the icing on the cake, or even just the cherry on top, really. But I think it's that understanding the whole less is more concept, and as the Bauhaus motto used to be, do less in order to do more. That's the real key thing to remember with the editing thing. Understand how it's all done and understand where it needs to be applied selectively, but don't feel like you need to do everything that Snapseed can do all on the same picture. But from a compositional point of view, understanding that sometimes you're taking a photograph of say a set of skyscrapers or something. There's no way standing at street level you're going to be able to compose that correctly. You will have converging verticals and leaning buildings, and so in that way it's actually really important to know that you can fix that in the edit, and understand what your edit is capable of doing. And what's, say for example, Snapseed's perspective tool that we mentioned, if you know what that can do, then you know where how much you can push the image at the time of taking. So it's really important to have the two skill sets side by side.
It is. Your book, look through the chapters. You've got an introduction to Snapseed. You've got the first steps, which I really like as an inclusion to kind of help you filter through your photos. And you've got compositional improvements, global adjustments, local adjustments, beyond the basics. And then what I really like there, you've got the case study. So a quarter of the book is all just examples, beautiful examples, lots of variety, lots of different case studies there to show people the process. One of the things when I deliver a 6-step process for editing, one of the challenges that I think that I face by doing that is that I'm taking away their creative control, and by having prescribed workflow, I'm telling them how to do it. And it's good to break down every tool, say this is what the tool does, that sort of thing. How do you deliver photo editing workshops and in this book in a way that people feel empowered to go away and look at a totally different photo and use your information and apply it themselves?
I think the important thing when teaching is I kind of mix it up between giving them, during my workshops, the students will follow along with an image that I've supplied. So we all work on the same image, but every now and then I'll go, we'll have break points where I say, go and get one of your own images and see which of the last 3 steps you need to apply. So I'm constantly saying, go and check if another image out of your camera roll needs these. And if they don't, then that's fine. But I think what I find most empowering is when people understand how tools work. They don't necessarily feel that at that point they need to apply them all, but they feel less intimidated by the whole process once they understand what everything does. So I'm always very keen to point out that this is partly a workflow because there are certain things that need to be done in a certain order to stop you kind of repeating yourself or doing something that affects a layer incorrectly, which doesn't happen a lot. I mean, with Snapseed, every layer is you can kind of go back and revisit it over and over again. And I really like that about Snapseed, that it's got this ability it's non-destructive editing. So you can revisit even the first crop and just, fix things as you go along or delete layers or move the order of them around. So it's so flexible. But and I think that's what I try and teach people more is just about the flexibility of the program and how easy it is for people to understand what their needs are and how you can apply them through software like that. But you're right, that is something you have to be really careful of. And in a workshop of 10 people, there will occasionally be one who kind of tries to follow it in a very prescriptive way because that's how they work. And that's how they're used to being taught stuff. But even those people sometimes will kind of just take longer to come back. And, by the end of the day, they've got something that some of the people will have got quicker in the morning because some people find it easier to just let go and kind of be free with things. But I think it's just about circling round repeatedly to the point that, you don't apply everything to every edit and making sure that they understand that you just do what's needed. So part of what I do at the beginning of that book, which I always do through the workshops, is ask people to really carefully assess their picture before they start. So I kind of get them to write a mental map or perhaps even on a piece of paper and a pencil, if that's how they function better, is what is it that needs editing in this image. So have they got the horizon slightly wonky, or is there a leaning building, or does the color look a bit off, or do the clouds not look as punchy as they did? So they kind of need to go in with an idea of what needs to be done, and then they can kind of just stick to the things that are needed and come out the other side without having done too much, hopefully.
Fantastic. I'm gonna try and embarrass you a little bit here. I had a look at Amazon and I saw some reviews of the book.
Yeah.
And I just want to touch on a couple of them here, and it kind of connects with what you're saying there. One of them was very helpful book, even if you're already using Snapseed. Although they said Snapseed, how did they get that wrong? I've been using it since 2014 and still picked up good knowledge in areas I wasn't experienced with using. And that goes to what you were saying before, that you can be, and one of the things I love about it is on the surface level, it's the app is not intimidating, it's intuitive to use. But then when you get into, you talked about the layers and the history where you can go in, you can do the masking and real localized stuff. That's next
the one that always blows people away.
Yeah. I'm going to share another couple. A complete workflow for editing on any phone or tablet is extremely informative and well written, should be a must read for anyone who enjoys using Snapseed and wants to utilize the full power of the free photo editing app. I was a big fan of Joe's first book on smartphone photography. This one doesn't disappoint with the same easy to read layout, structure. This book is a must read for anyone who wants to make the most of pictures they take on their mobile phone.
Oh, that's so lovely.
But there's a real common theme there, is that these people that have taken the time and care to make these comments and share these experiences with the rest of us, they're already Snapseed users, which is really interesting, isn't it? Because I know you can jump on YouTube and you can have a look at YouTube and you can look up, okay, how do I use the expand tool? But when somebody like yourself puts it together in a structured way and puts together a workflow, you can learn so much more about the step-by-steps. And as you said, you avoid repetition, you avoid going back over something you've already done because you've done it in a structured way.
Thank you. And thank you to all those people who wrote me those lovely reviews.
Do you go back and check those every now and again?
My agent does, so she'll sit and read them back to me sometimes, but I always worry that they're not going to be good reviews, so I try not to read them in case it makes me feel sad. But actually she always says, no, they're all good.
Yeah, fantastic. There's no keyboard warriors.
I'm a bit of a fatalist, I think. I always expect the worst and then I'm pleasantly surprised. So perhaps that's not a bad way to be.
Oh, fantastic. Now, you sent through a couple of photos that I want to share. So if you're listening to the podcast, I'll try and explain the photo. But the first one you've sent through is a photo split in half with a beautiful sky, lots of cloud, sun bursting through. That's at the horizon's in the middle, and then just above the horizon, off center, you've got is that a raven? Is it called a raven over there?
It's a jackdaw, yeah, jackdaw.
Okay, and it's flying towards that the sun bursting through, and then underneath you've got the beautiful greenery of Dartmoor or the national park there, I'm assuming, with the just a really nice green, not oversaturated, everything. And one of the things I love about your editing is that nothing's oversaturated and it's pulled back really nice and subtle. And you've got the light coming through the bird there as well. So when you were editing this photo, I know you said with your students, you get them to sit down and go, okay, what needs editing in this photo? What needed editing in this photo that we've got here?
So this was actually taken through the glass of my studio window. This is the elevated position is because it's upstairs in my studio. And I happened to look out from my desk where I'm sitting right now and saw the sun break through the clouds early evening. And to my eye, the detail in the clouds was spectacular. The birds weren't there. It was just the light. So I went and grabbed my phone. And the first few pictures I took were just trying to get the light in the clouds and the sky balance, because the clouds were really dark, but the light breaking through was very bright. The sun was quite low. The sun also had a really warm yellow light to it, which the camera didn't record very well. The image originally came back looking quite grey at the top with no warmth in the light, but also because of the low light evening and the darkness that the clouds were casting, the ground had come up really flat and dark, but there were occasional bits of it that the algorithms for some reason made them look a bit oversaturated, which is not uncommon with smartphone photography, that the algorithm can try and boost greens and you get this kind of slightly acid fake looking grass. So they were the two major things. And then framing up compositionally, I don't normally frame up at a kind of 50-50 split of sky and land, and this one's close to that. It's just slightly above the 50-50 mark on the horizon line. But I just wanted to give because I wasn't sure. I saw these birds take off in the distance, and when you look at this photo, there's a couple of smaller birds set back further into the beam of light, but I saw them take off and I thought there's a chance here that one of these will circle past or maybe will fly under the light. So I basically framed the photograph up, dropped the exposure as much as I could, and then shot in burst mode and shot about 15 photographs, and was very lucky that one of the birds circled and came right past my window, so it's much bigger in the image. And then there were multiple photos of it with its wings in different positions, and I was able to select that one. But when I actually looked at the pictures afterwards, they didn't have the drama that I'd seen as clearly defined. The beam of light needed a bit of work because you could see the light going across the frame and touching the gate and the hedge on the right hand side of the frame. But so the things that I did with this one, I knew when I was shooting it, there were a couple of giant bits of wild horse poo in the foreground that were quite distracting. So I thought, I know I'm going to clean those off. I'm not a big fan of cleaning things up, but in this case it felt like a good idea to have a bit of a tidy up. Also, it was wool shedding season for the sheep, so there was wool everywhere, which was quite distracting because it was so bright. So I cleaned up the wool and the pony poo, and then I did a bit to just bring the saturation correct into the image. I also worked with making the beams of lights pop a little bit more from their background, and I always do a bit to make the clouds pop. So there's a kind of there's no specific order that you need to do that workflow in when you're working with Snapseed necessarily. None of those jobs is going to particularly make a problem for the next one that you do, but I do think that when you're working like this, if you kind of know the things that you need to do, like for the clouds, I wanted to use my tonal contrast tool. I love the tonal contrast tool in Snapseed. It's such a clever little tool. The thing that is a bit worrying about it though is that when you turn it on, it automatically applies tonal contrast in the high, mid and low range. So the first thing I always do when I open it is turn everything back to 0, and then I'll start from 0 and just apply it selectively to just the high tones so that it only affects the clouds and doesn't affect everything else. And the same when I'm applying vignettes, I try not to just apply a circular vignette that looks really obvious across the whole picture, but I do like to bring a bit of mood and depth into the image by adding it around the very edges. But if you can use the techniques that I've described in the case study for this one in the book, you can see that you can apply a vignette in such a way that it only affects the darker areas, and anywhere that's light, like patches of sky, don't get darkened during the vignette, so it makes the whole thing look a lot more natural. And I think always key to me is that I don't want the images to look too over processed. I just want them to look like a beautiful photo, not a heavily edited one. So that's always my key, is I'll keep looking at it and thinking, can I see the edit? And if I can, I'll go back and turn things down a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant. I don't know, that the sheep's poo and all that sort of thing. That's contextual, isn't it?
It kind of is, but actually the sheep poo wasn't as bad. I admit I'm guilty sometimes of cleaning it up, but it was the white sheep's wool. There was a lot of it all over the place, and because they were making big white spots, it was really visible in the frame. So I felt like it was a nicer image without it. But something else Absolutely. I do all the time is revisit and turn the layers on and off constantly, assessing I call it interrogating the stack, where I go back and constantly turn the layers on and off and just see whether actually what I've done has actually improved the photo and if it's made it worse. And quite often one of the layers that I'll delete and do again is the cleanup layer, because I'll get guilty of cleaning it up, like the way you dust a shelf or something. Once you get started, you want it to be spick and span, but you kind of sometimes just realize you've completely overdone it.
I'm joking, because I love, that's one of people that are in my community know how much I obsess over a clean photo.
Okay. So stop winding me up. You're making me feel guilty. There's literally no way you'd have left that poo in there. It was massive. It was more of a feature than the bird, and the bird needed to sing in that image, so the poo had to go. And
that's one of the things, and I know in presentations, workshops, all that sort of thing, when you show people the healing tool, the Band-Aid, people just go, oh wow, this is real, desktop photo editing program stuff. I can do this on a phone. Like, it just blows people away. It does. And because it really is, as you say, it's the icing on the cake. And I use that expression all the time. It's the icing on the cake. It's the refinement. And it's really the difference between a snapshot, recording what's in front of you, and a creation of an image, is that you go to that trouble. And I love that healing tool. I remember once on a workshop, this lady was so excited when I showed her this. She's all bubbly and excited. I thought, oh no, it's pretty cool. She goes, no, you don't understand. Now I can get rid of my ex-husband in all my photos.
That's funny. I've had people say they've deleted friends before that they've fallen out with, so I can imagine that's true.
Yep. It's a great tool. Be not that good.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And there was another one you sent through here. Can you explain for the people who are listening on the podcast? Can you, just explain the visual of what's happening inside this?
So this is a photo. This is a photo of my young daughter, Grace, and she's obsessed with, she's moved into her own room that she was sharing before, and she's really, really into fairy lights and strip lights of different colours and 1,300 lamps in the room. She's got a big thing about light, funnily enough. I blame myself. As an aside, the reason why I think she's obsessed with light is because when she was 2 years old and she had to ride on my back with me all day, every day, while I did a 365-day photo project on the moor, and I'd often talk to her and just say, wow, look at the light, Gracie, and I'd stop and get my camera out. And I can remember just before her 3rd birthday, her shouting at me to stop the car one day, and I was thinking, what's happening? She was like, Mummy, stop the car. And I stopped, and she went, look at the light, and pointed out the window. And from that moment, I just felt like it's possibly the proudest I've ever been of her. But so she's still like it now. She's really, really into light. So she'd come upstairs to my studio to show me these fairy lights that had just come, and she'd turned them all on. And I just thought it made a really nice picture. I was holding a piece of glass at the time, and it was making the lights from the lights that she was holding bounce up, so that it almost looks like she's looking at another set of little sparkly lights up above her. So I showed her the photo, and she said, oh, it's like little fairies or fireflies flying around. So can I have that photo? So it was just one of those things where when I looked at it on screen afterwards, I realized that the lights were casting a really yellow colour around part of her face, but also the backdrop, which was quite turquoise, was reading it as really green in the photo. The algorithms had a really difficult time managing the colour balance, and it had made her eyes, sometimes with photography in portraiture, you'll notice that people's eyes don't always look quite right, so they can sometimes use a subtle amount of adjusting just in the sort of pupil and the iris area, of just adding a tiny bit more contrast to return the irises back to black, because they can quite often record as grey and look a bit milky. So the main focus of this photo was to colour balance it and to just put some of the strength of the blacks back into her eye area, just to make it look more like I saw it in that moment. So that's basically what I did here, and using things like curves is such a powerful tool for colour correction. So I was able to kind of take the green out of her skin and make her skin look, she's a real English rose, pinky, pale complexion. So just to return her skin colour to the way it should have looked, which was being affected by the coloured backdrop and the coloured lights. So it's little things like that, having that skill set in your back pocket to know that you can take that photo and be able to recover it so she still looks, human in the right colours afterwards is a lovely thing to be able to do. And to know that you can do that in your phone is just brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things we love about photos, isn't it? The story behind the photo, and capturing that and having the narrative in the photo. It's brilliant. Fantastic. All right. I think I've taken a lot of your time now. We've gone 45 minutes. I said 45 minutes and we've just gone over. So
that's fine. I've had such a lovely time. Thank you.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. Me too. So where can people learn more about you and get in touch with you and more importantly, where can they buy the book?
So you can buy the book in any bookseller. You can buy it in shops. You can buy it online. You can order it in various places. If you live somewhere where you can't get to a shop, you can order it from various online sellers. So but if you wanted to talk to me and ask me any questions, I've got a contact form on my website, which is worldwideweb.greenislandstudios.co.uk. Yeah, I'm always happy to hear from people. And if you want to join one of my online workshops that we do on Zoom, they are available through the Royal Photographic Society. You can go onto their website, or just Google Royal Photographic Society. And if you put Joe Bradford in inverted commas next to it, all my workshops will appear. So you'll be able to find me through that. And I even do talks for camera clubs and things. So you'll see me pop up in all sorts of strange and wonderful places.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of online now, isn't it? We can do that. Yeah. That's brilliant. Fantastic. Great. Thanks. And great to talk to you. And I'll talk to you again soon.
Yeah. Thanks very much for having me, Mike.